You are now entering the painting zone. There is no turning back. Well, technically there is, but you probably shouldn't turn back because it's going to be mighty entertaining and educational at the same time. So are you ready to return to Tentacle Town? Hello there. So, this is quite a gargantuan model we've got here today. It's partly obscuring my face, which most would say is a bad thing, and you can just about see its legs here on the main camera. So when I'm working on it, I'm going to hold it in kind of this position so you can actually see what's going on. And then occasionally I might give you a full upright shot, like so. This is, as you can see on the right there, a mantic giant, but it's not just any mantic giant, heavily converted. And by heavily I mean heavily. It is going to be a Shadow Hulk for my Night Stalker army, Kings of War, and if anyone hasn't seen this before, I'll quickly go over the conversions for you before we actually start putting any more paint on this sucker. So, first of all, it doesn't have a head. Instead, it has numerous tentacles, which are from a Mantic Hellboy tentacle monster. And just put my finger in some super glue there a second, because I've got it pinned to this little painting tub here. And I've glued the pins on underneath so that it won't wobble around quite so much. But some of it was still a bit wet, and my thumb went straight into it, so I had to remember not to put my thumb under there. So, heavily converted. Tentacles. There's also a Mantic Hellboy frog monster head on the side there. And I thought, you know what, let's just cover the whole thing in faces. So, I took various molds of faces from miniatures and applied them to this with green stuff, and then blended them in a bit with some milliput. So the kneecap has a face on it, which is one of the giant's heads that actually comes with the model, and it's got a couple of nice arms there sticking out. The random arms and tentacles and bits sticking out are from various ranges, a lot of Mantic stuff, there's some Dead Zone stuff, like sticking out this dragon's head, which is the Mantic dragon. There's a bit of a plague swarm from Dead Zone. And there's another bit of it crawling into this mouth, and this mouth it's going into is the face of a Moorbeast, or a face of a Fleabag actually, from Kings of War Goblin Army. There's a little hand poking out the side with a little demon thing sitting on it. Lots of Mantic bits. There's a few GW tentacles as well that I had lying around in a bits box for years. There's some Night Stalker bits, some little heads. There's one on the toe there as well. Hopefully you can see that one well. And also, some of the faces are a bit familiar. This one on the elbow is a Yoda little action figure. Then there are various heads and pustules and such from Relics, the miniatures game. So lots of those as well. There's another Mantic giant head. You'll have seen that I used both of the other heads when I was making my Dread Fiends for this army in the past. If you haven't seen that, then the video, I think there's a showcase video on this channel that you should be looking at, which has them finished, and they're quite disturbing. They're basically heads on legs, more tentacles, and anything else of note. I think that's pretty much it. Very complicated model. Took a long time to assemble all this, and it's going to take an even longer time to paint it all probably. So what have I done so far? We've purpled it all up, and then a bit of washing and dry brushing, which isn't the finished stage. I just wanted to do that so I could bring out all the details mainly, because I'm going to be painting over most of that. The tentacles have got a bit more colour on them though. They're going to be a different colour to the rest. And then I started painting the wood and the metals last time, which was quite a while ago, the last time I worked on this bad boy. So, where to start on something like this? We've got Annie in the chat who says, Yoda elbow is my favourite. Everyone loves a Yoda elbow. Who wouldn't want Yoda on their elbow? We've got Cedar in there as well. We've got several viewers, some of whom aren't commenting or liking the video, I've noticed, which is frankly a disgrace. So let's see. How do we want to begin? It's quite a daunting prospect. I think we can finish the metal on the weapon. As you can see, there's lots of these little bits that haven't been picked out yet. So with a model like this, when you haven't really got a plan of how you're going to proceed, you might as well just go with whatever you see. If you spot something, work on that, and then just keep going, keep chipping away at it. So I think we'll do that first. Just try and keep some kind of order to it. Try and get as many base colours down as possible, and then we can do like the clothing and the ropes and such. And then all the highlighting and all the washes is going to take place later. Just going to get lots of base coats down. There's all kinds of ropes running across its back. If you've seen the Mantic Giant in the flesh, you know it's quite a detailed miniature, and I've only added more detail to it. So you can see that despite me adding super glue underneath this thing, it still wobbles from side to side on the thing I've got it perched on. I could secure it more firmly just by gluing its feet to this thing. But do I need to? I can just kind of hold it like that. That'll be fine. So we need metal. I feel like I was using this. I don't even know what colour this is. There we go. It's really faded. It actually says old bronze there. I don't think you can even see it. Very faded label. This is a Reaper paint, I think, which is probably as part of a free goodie bag at a tournament or something, because this is the only one I've got from this range. So we're going to splodge some of this onto the wet palette and then start applying it wildly. So I haven't got any of my brushes ready yet. Let's have, what's a nice one for this? We don't want a too fine a brush. This one will do. So it's not got too fine a point, but it's good enough. Let's give it a good shake. And the splodge. So I don't think I've added the links to the description yet, but the most exciting news development right now is that I've finally decided to join the year 2010 and sign up on Instagram. So I'm going to start posting pictures of miniatures on there as they're painted or worked on, and also cake pictures, because that's my other thing that I do a lot of at the moment. I think this miniature is actually quite dusty. It's been sitting there for quite a while. Oh well. So let's start painting. Do I want to turn this light up a little bit actually? I might well do. That's the brightest it'll go. And I think that is going to help. So let's start painting these bits here. This is obviously where I got to last time, because this bit's clearly unfinished. In a minute I'll show you pictures of the finished Sergio the Saxman that I was working on last week as well. For anyone that hasn't seen that yet. In its completed state. If anyone else is working on anything at all this afternoon, then let me know. I painted much for Kings of War for a while, even though before the world decided to go to hell, I was playing that game more than any other. Since the first lockdown, how many games have I had? I had 2 games in the flesh, which were done safely during the summer. And I've had a few remote games over the internet. I haven't played at all on Universal Battle. I know some people have been using that to pass the time, but it doesn't really interest me. I'd rather have the actual miniatures out there on the table, as that's the most exciting part of the hobby, rather than just the rules and the tactics and such. Hopefully this is the kind of spicy, exciting content that gets people through these turbulent times at the moment. I wonder how long these times can be described as turbulent or unprecedented. So eventually, if it goes on long enough, there will be quite a precedent set. Got Graham in the house, the community legend, all-round live stream regular, viewer of content, absorber of knowledge, dispenser of wisdom. I'm not overly concerned with neatness on this thing. I'm more concerned with making sure you can actually see what I'm doing at the moment, actually. It's pretty difficult. It's such a monstrous creation. Even without any conversions on it, it's still a gargantuan prospect. To wrap your paintbrush around. To let people actually see that, with all the things that are poking off it as well, that are getting in the way of me applying the paint. There was no real plan for painting this while I was building it. It was just a case of, does this look cool? Let's stick it on and worry about the painting later. If I was planning this out for painting, then I'm sure I would have left some parts off to make it easier to get round as well. But that's not how we roll. I'm going to have to splodge some more paint out here. So I'll give you a quick look at the finished. Let's see, where have I got it? Here we go. There's Sergio, the Saxman from Bad Squiddo that I finished this week. I finished pretty much all the paintwork on the last stream, and then I just varnished it and put some tufts on the base since then, and took these lovely photos of it. I think it came out quite nicely. I was pondering making like a fiery base. I thought, you know what? Going through a meadow with a saxophone, there's not much that tops that, I would suggest. Okay, back to this. This dragon head arm is getting in the way of me positioning this. So what else on the weapon is going to be metal? I'm going to just paint bits of the handle metal, and then if I decide that any of them are going to be something else later, I can always paint over it. It's going to be a very long process, and I'll probably work on this outside of streams as well, because it is going to take a very long time, and if I only paint while streaming, then it'd probably take me months to finish. I'm not a particularly fast painter. When I turn it to certain angles, I can see little bits of purple showing through, which obviously I don't want. I think you've seen enough of Sergio now. So there's kind of a fabric wrapped around the weapon, so we don't need the whole handle to be done in this colour. So one of the challenges when building a model like this that's heavily converted is to stop it looking like you've just stuck bits onto an existing model, because that's what you're doing, but you don't want it to look like that. You want it to look cohesive. So it's supposed to look that way. It's not really an issue if you're doing something like building orc vehicles, because they're supposed to look like things just stuck together. But with this, it's supposed to look more like things are nightmarishly growing out of it, not they've been stuck on. So you've got to blend the pieces in. I'm painting this shield on the arm now. Once I've got all the base coats down, it should be pretty straightforward, because I can just pick an area and then start throwing the brush. Then I can start highlighting that one area per video, probably. As much flesh as there is, that won't take a vast amount of time, I suspect. Things that take a long time, little tiny details that has to be picked out, and the paint's going to strain, and then you've got to go back and neaten it up. So things like the ropes that just run across everything, holding these shields in place. So what else wants to be metal? There's lots of little things. Anything that's actually on the clothing I'm probably not going to touch yet. I would rather paint that in the main colour and then do the metal on top of that at the end. We've got the edges of all these shields as well, which want to be in metal, I think. So again, not overly concerned about neatness at this point. There's going to be a lot more colours going on. There's going to be a lot more mess. I'll have a better idea of how it's going to look when it's finished as well, once the base coats are on. Because at the moment it's very difficult to visualise it, since I haven't made any major colour decisions, including the clothing, which is obviously quite a large part of the model. 5 people watching at the moment. I did tag Mantic in my tweet about this, since it is one of their models. So I don't know if they pay any attention to that. I'm going to need more paint. Squeezing out, or splodging out. It's not drying up, obviously, because it's on the wet palette, but I'm just using a lot of it. Quite difficult to squeeze the paint out of this. It's pretty old. On we go with the shield edges. It's quite difficult to paint something that's much further away as well, because obviously I don't want to grip it by the model itself constantly. So the part I'm working on is more out of reach than it normally is. Just the size of it just makes it more of a challenge, logistically. I hope Shadow Hulks are actually good in the rules, because this is going to get used on the battlefield regardless. The actual Mantic's own Shadow Hulk is pretty nice, which is a kind of an upgrade kit for the Giant, which has a very large open mouth, which is kind of a little bit Beetlejuice-esque. But I wanted to go a step further. And since I had this Giant lying around, why not? This was started quite a while ago. Started before I moved to Nottingham, actually. So quite a few months now. It's just been sitting there looking at me. I haven't been working on too much stuff. It's been somewhat busy since arriving here. But now is the time. I would like to see some more comments down there, actually, if you don't mind. It's a bit windy outside today. Swirling. I know lots of areas in the country are having some flooding issues. Don't think this house is in too much peril. Right. What next? There's just lots of little bits that were missed, and there's lots of tiny little things that could be metal, theoretically, if I choose for them to be. Got a couple of shield edges here as well around the front. I'm not going to go too crazy with like 86 highlight layers on this thing because it is just a big hideous monster. And I think the actual build of the model is the most important thing. The paint job just needs to be enough to do it justice, so it doesn't have to be too complicated. It's so big. If I go too crazy on the highlights, then I would never finish it. It's cold and windy in Leicester, apparently. Also known as Rem Town. He only started calling it that after he gained fame on this channel, though. More shield edges. With a model like this, as big and intimidating as it is, you can't think too much about the finished article. You've just got to look at it bit by bit, and day by day just add a little bit to it here and there. And eventually it'll get to a point where it's easier to visualize the end. And then it becomes easier to paint. Because once you see the end of the tunnel, you get that burst of energy, extra motivation. So until then, it is kind of a battle. But you just have to keep adding paint. Eventually, there'll be that moment when it just grabs you. One of the big challenges with this one is actually just angling the brush into the places it needs to be. It's so big and unwieldy and tentacly and pokey. But it's all going to be worth it at the end. That's the most important thing. When I look at a model like this, when I'm in my motivated mood, then I think, what would the me of tomorrow say if I added a couple of bits of paint to this? And I think the me of tomorrow would be quite grateful that he didn't have to do it. So that's how you've got to look at it, I think. Certain models will be a chore at times until you reach that point. What next? More obvious large metal bits I'm looking out for here. I've got some more shield edges here. And the centre of the shield as well. I don't know if all the metals will finish as this colour, but just for now they will. did I spot another shield? Needed a bit of attention. This one. Oh, as I was saying earlier, if you're an Instagram user, you can now follow me on there. The name's easy enough. Just Andy2D6, like most of the places. What else is coming up on this channel soon? Well, possibly Vermintide on Sunday, which is always a hoot. And obviously the Andy and Rem show next week, which I'm sure will focus on a lot of the new GW stuff. Seems to be on the horizon. Which we didn't look at in too much detail on this week's show, because we were busy talking about rats. Bad Squiddo, Annie is deciding whether to escape into the sunshine for some vitamin D or finish all of the tasks. Well, when I first read that, I read it as escape the sunshine of Vietnam, and I thought that's probably not very easy to do at the moment. I would recommend finishing a task. Just do tasks one by one until you've had enough. Pick something, get it done, and see how you feel after that. Just chip away. Yeah, there is a bit of sunshine outside now. What next? Almost ready to leave this metal alone for now. I think we're going to start painting this whole fabric area. So, what colour? I'm going to bring up actually a picture of the other models in this army. And then maybe you can help me decide what colour I should be doing things. There you go. So those are the Dread Fiends that this guy is going to be joining in the Night Stalker's army. So not a whole lot of fabric going on. They're kind of a pinky colour. They've got these ghostly, like ethereal looking beards and hair. So what colour clothing should this army be wearing? Because I've only painted the flesh so far, as you can see there. What goes nicely with pinks and purples? I'm sure someone in the chat has got some valuable insight on this. Because any fur and hair is going to be in that green colour. And quite a lot of the models in the army will have some level of clothing or fabric on them. Things like scarecrows typically have some clothing on, for instance. So what's the main fabric-based colour scheme going to be? They also have the darker green slime coming out of various orifices. You can see it coming out of the mouths on the dread fiends there, and you can see it oozing out of various places on the base as well, on the decoration there. Which are all bad Squiddo scenics there on the bases. So I'm not sure about orange, because I do that on all my armies somewhere. So maybe we should pick a different colour. But what's it going to be? I've got pretty much every colour available. Let's hear some advice, folks. Give me your thoughts. Let me feast upon them. Anybody? Somebody in the comments, I'm sure, is going to start just spamming with colour suggestions any minute now. Cedar thinks brown. I'm not sure about brown, because brown is going to be used on all the wood that's on this model. There's quite a lot. And also the metallic colour is kind of browny as well. Well then, I'm just going to have to pick something and go for it. So, let's see. The options we have. Blue, yellow, black, white, green, which is already featuring on there in various places. Don't want to use orange. Red. Lots of different greens I have available. I could go for some kind of green, but then I've already got the hair and the beards and the slime that are green, so is that too much green? Grey. I like the very bright colours of the existing models, though. I think it should be something bright. I don't know about yellow, though. That might be too much. What about my other paint box? Anything that jumps out at me? Not getting a lot of suggestions from the people here. Let's see. I do have a lot of browns, but is that too much brown on there? It would be dingy which I'm not sure I want to go for. I want it to be colourful, because these things don't have to look too natural, they just have to look nightmarish. So what would be a nightmarish colour? And of course it does look kind of stitched together, so we could go for a kind of striped look. Let's get rid of this picture so you can see what I'm talking about. So on this bit of danglage it's got going on here, it's stitched into several different sheets, so they don't all have to be the same colour. It looks like there's 3 distinct ones, and then on the back we've also got 4 distinct fabric pieces that could all be a different colour theoretically as well. So skin tones, interesting. Do I want it to look like it's wearing like the flapping flesh of other creatures? There is some potential to that. It is wearing a lot of teeth. I'm tempted. Suppose we could try that and see how it looks. Kind of fleshy colour. So, what flesh tones have I got? I've got pale flesh. And I could just paint it all in pale flesh and then just do different washes over the different sections for different complexions, and then just see how it looks from there. Might be the best suggestion so far if he's wearing like a skin skirt. Let's just go for it. If it's terrible, it can always be painted over. I want a different brush though. Nice big fat base coated kind of brush. This one here will do nicely. Into the wet palette it goes. So I'm starting to think this is actually a terrible time slot for doing painting, by the way. Or maybe it just takes like 10 episodes before you start to build an audience. Or maybe people only want to see painting of like space marines or something. I could always consider late night painting streams instead. One of the things you have to fight against, really, in this hobby, if you're trying to get into the streaming side of it, is community indifference. How can you make people care enough to watch your stuff? What's the hook? At the moment, I'm not really attempting to have much of one. I'm just doing what I want to be painting and just putting it out there for people to see. If I want more people to view it, late night painting is definitely an option though. That's something I might consider and see if that does any better numbers than this afternoon slot. Community still seems to be torn on the new GW releases. The kangaroo riding elves. I've seen a bit more praise for them in recent days. I suppose we'll find out exactly how popular they are. Speaking of live streams, I've just gone in for the old Twitch experiment. Not doing any painting stuff on there, but I am doing some PC game twitching as an experiment to see how that goes, just to get myself familiar with it. And I'll be doing that tonight, sometime around about midnight or shortly after. I'll be continuing to play Necrovision, the PC game. So my Twitch name is Andy2D6Orange. If you feel like subscribing to that. But I think that's the regular slot. Thursday night, very late, bordering on Friday morning. For that kind of content. If anyone's interested. Another option for paint streams would be Tuesday before the Andy and Rem show. So kind of early evening slot. Because that's the day of the week I'm definitely going to be awake at that time, since I've got the show to do at 8. But maybe before then would be an interesting slot for painting. We've been going 48 minutes. Doesn't feel like I've got that much done in the time, but it is such a large model. The flesh skirt is obviously coming along. It's not going to be this bright at the end, of course. It's going to need washes on it. At varying degrees. To make it look like kind of patchwork of different flesh harvested from poor unfortunate creatures. From that angle brush in there to paint the back of each skirt flap now, which is not the easiest thing to do. But it doesn't have to be perfect, because who's going to see up there really? I'm sure somebody will. Okay, now the back flap. Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking a Tuesday early evening stream could be good. But also build some suspense for the Andy and Rem show as well. Might give that a try next week. So obviously, even if whichever slot I choose, there's only 3 people watching, then I'm still going to do it probably because it helps me get stuff painted. But if there's a time I can do it that's no less convenient to me and more people watch it then I might as well choose that. I've always said I don't want to turn into one of those channels that just keeps cranking out content for years and years with 33 views on every video. It's kind of depressing to look at. And there's quite a few of them in the wargaming community. If it ever starts looking like my channel is going to turn into that, changes would be made. Not too bothered about splodging paint on the legs at the moment because, like I said, this is just the base colour that they've got on right now. There are going to be multiple highlights on all the purple flesh. Okay, the skirt is looking very fleshy. You can see a bit better on this other camera there. It's going to add a little bit of variety to it, isn't it, I suppose? I'm going to soap off this brush. So am I going to do anything to this before the next paint stream? Probably. There's so much to do. I might as well just poke away at it like most days, just for a few minutes here and there. If I have a spare 10 minutes, why not just get the brush out and just add something small to it? Just gets it done faster. And then I can get to the exciting stuff on the streams then, rather than just the poking away and rotating the model looking for tiny details that I haven't found. By tiny details, I mean tiny areas that I haven't base coated. The actual details will be for later. Getting this brush nice and clean. Don't want to leave any in there to ruin what little point it has left. Okay, almost an hour in. I think it's apparent that people aren't really interested in this time slot for a painting stream. So, next week, we shall move on and try the crazy idea of 2 live streams in one day. So I'm leaning very, very heavily towards Tuesday before the Andy and Rem show, somewhere around 6 p.m. perhaps. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Also, in the meantime, like I mentioned earlier, if anyone's at all interested in Twitch PC games, Andy2D6 Orange, you can look at that. There's going to be some of that juicy action tonight, after midnight probably. And anything else to mention? If anyone wasn't here at the start, then Andy2D6 on Instagram is a thing now, if you want to look at my painted miniature pictures and cake pictures, and that's pretty much going to be it. Also, if you know people I should be following on Instagram with good wargaming content, then let me know as well. Okay. Let's bring up the episode thumbnail here. Don't forget to check out all the links below, including the links that don't exist yet that I have just told you about, that will exist at some point. And if you want to keep this channel afloat, don't forget to send me all your money as well. That's always handy. Via Patreon is a good way of going about that. And don't forget to like the video, obviously, subscribe if for some strange reason you haven't, and stay tuned for more succulent, juicy content. I'm going to be painting more of this thing next week, probably on a Tuesday, as we experiment with the time slots to try and gather and harvest the biggest possible audience. And I think that is all that needs to be said. Hopefully I'll see more people in here next week, and before that perhaps as well, possibly for Vermintide on Sunday. And I will say to you, good afternoon out there, whatever you are.